In March of 2021, a single cargo ship, the Ever Given, got blown sideways by a gust of wind and completely wedged itself into the banks of the Suez Canal.
Oh, man, what an absolute disaster that was.
Right. I mean, for 6 days, it just sat there. And every single day that it sat there, it halted roughly $9 billion in global trade.
$9 billion.
No.
A day. It's just staggering to even wrap your head around.
It is, but the most shocking part of that whole crisis wasn't the stuck ship itself. The truly terrifying part was the aftermath.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when these multi-billion-dollar global corporations desperately trying to figure out if their critical raw materials were, actually on that ship or maybe stuck in the massive traffic jam behind it, a staggering number of them realized something horrifying.
They had no clue.
Exactly. They had absolutely no idea. They couldn't actually see their own supply chains.
Yeah, it was a massive wake-up call for the entire global economy. I mean, companies realized that they had built these incredibly long, complex, highly fragile physical supply chains spanning the entire globe, but they just hadn't built the digital infrastructure required to actually monitor them.
They were just completely flying blind.
Literally flying blind.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is tackling what I honestly consider the invisible architecture of the modern world. We are unpacking end-to-end connectivity and visibility in the supply chain.
It is such a crucial topic.
It really is. So we are digging deep into Module 2, Section B of our source materials to figure out how this all actually works. So if you've ever tracked a package on your phone and watched it mysteriously reroute around a blizzard, or, if you're prepping for a massive logistics overhaul at your company, or if you just want to understand the technological bedrock of global commerce, you are in the exact right place.
Yeah, we're going to cover a lot of ground today.
We really are. We're going to explore the massive software applications that run these empires, the invisible middleware that kind of forces incompatible systems to talk to each other, the brutal physics of e-commerce, and finally, the absolute lifeblood of it all, which is master data. So, okay, let's unpack this.
I am ready when you are.
Awesome. Well, we have to start at the foundation. I mean, before we can even dream about connecting a global supply chain, we need to understand the massive engines that sit inside a single company, right? The heavy lifters.
Right, the internal systems.
Yeah, and the undisputed king of the corporate tech stack is the ERP, Enterprise Resources Planning.
The big one.
The big one. Now, I frequently hear ERP described as the brain of a business. It holds all the company's data, it connects all the departments. But what I don't understand is if I go out and spend $20 million on an ERP system, and it is the brain of my company, why am I constantly hearing about supply chain managers buying a half dozen other highly specialized software programs?
It's a great question.
Right. Shouldn't a $20 million brain just do everything?
Well, it's a very common frustration, honestly. But to understand why the brain doesn't do everything, you really have to look at the genetic evolution of what an ERP actually is. I mean, the modern ERP didn't just fall out of the sky.
It evolved from something else.
Exactly. It evolved from a much narrower, much simpler system in the 1970s called MRP, which stands for Material Requirements Planning.
MRP. Okay, so just focused on the raw stuff needed to build a product, right?
Yeah, exactly. Let's say you manufactured bicycles back in 1975. Your MRP system took a master production schedule, meaning, it said, we need to build 1,000 bicycles next month.
Okay, got it.
And it cross-referenced that against a bill of materials, which is basically just the recipe. It said, okay, to build 1,000 bikes, we need 2,000 tires, 1,000 frames, and 4,000 reflectors.
Makes sense.
Right, and then it checked the warehouse inventory, figured out what was missing, and just told you what to buy. And that was it. That was the whole system.
Very functional, but I'm guessing completely isolated from the rest of the business.
Completely isolated. I mean, the manufacturing team knew exactly what to build, but the finance department had no idea what it was going to cost until the physical invoices actually showed up in the mail.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the human resources department didn't know they needed to hire 20 temporary workers to actually build those bikes. Every single department was its own silo.
That sounds like a nightmare for coordination.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
If a supplier changed their billing address, you had a clerk in purchasing type the new address into their system, and then a completely different clerk in accounting type it into theirs.
And if one of them made a typo?
Exactly. If one makes a typo, you suddenly have a massive administrative disaster on your hands.
So an ERP was built to solve that exact fragmentation.
Yes, that's right. MRP eventually evolved into MRP2, which brought in capacity planning, and eventually the software developers realized, hey, What if we just put the entire company on one single shared central database?
Which seems so obvious now.
Right, but back then it was revolutionary. That is the true genius of a modern ERP. It's a modularized suite of business applications. Finance, HR, logistics, sales, manufacturing, they all pull from the exact same pool of data.
So you enter that vendor's address exactly once.
Exactly once. That single source of truth is used by purchasing to order the tires, by the warehouse to receive them, and by finance to pay the bill. The ERP acts as the absolute, undisputed system of record for the entire enterprise.
Okay, that makes total sense. It creates a unified reality for the company. But you still haven't actually answered my initial question.
I haven't, no.
If it unites the whole company perfectly, why do I still need to buy outside software? Why do companies spend a fortune on these hyper-specific, what they call best-of-breed systems?
Right, okay. Because an ERP, by its very nature, is a transactional system. It is essentially a massive digital ledger.
A ledger, okay.
Yeah, it is exceptionally good at recording what has already happened, capturing current inventory states, and processing very straightforward orders.
Yeah.
But, as companies grew into massive global entities, just recording transactions wasn't enough anymore.
They needed something more proactive.
Exactly. They needed to do advanced, highly complex predictive mathematics. They needed serious optimization.
So the ERP is great at knowing, like, hey, we have 10,000 tires in the warehouse, but it's not great at figuring out the absolute optimal geographical routing to ship them to 50 different retail stores across the country.
Precisely. To use a medical analogy, think of your ERP as a brilliant general practitioner. It understands the health of the entire body, it keeps all the records, and it handles the day-to-day stuff.
Right.
But if you need open heart surgery, you absolutely do not want your general practitioner holding the scalpel. You bring in a cardiologist.
Okay, I love that analogy.
A best-of-breed system is the cardiologist. It is a piece of software built by a vendor who focuses entirely on one specific, highly complex function like optimizing those transportation routes or forecasting incredibly volatile consumer demand.
So it's a fundamental trade-off. You can buy the transportation module from your ERP vendor, and it will integrate perfectly because, well, it's part the same software, but it might only be just kind of good enough.
Right.
Or you can go buy a best-of-breed transportation system that does incredible magical things, but then you have the massive headache of trying to make it talk to your ERP.
That is the eternal debate for every chief information officer out there. And one of the most critical areas where companies constantly seek out that best-of-breed functionality brings us to our next major acronym in the text. APS, Advanced Planning and Scheduling.
Advanced planning and scheduling. Okay, so if the ERP is a system of record, what exactly is the APS doing?
The APS is the system of optimization. It does not just record data, it actually ingests data from the ERP and applies highly advanced mathematical algorithms to perform complex simulations.
Right. Simulations of what exactly?
It looks at demand management, resource allocation, and requirements optimization.
Yeah.
But the key differentiator here is that an APS simultaneously considers a massive web of real-world constraints and business rules.
Okay, give me an example of a constraint in this context, because I assume you don't just mean like a budget constraint.
No. We're talking physical, operational constraints. Let's go back to that bicycle manufacturer.
Okay.
The ERP knows you have an order for 5,000 custom mountain bikes due in 3 weeks.
Simple enough.
But the ERP doesn't know that Machine B, which paints the bike frames, is down for scheduled maintenance for the next 3 days. It doesn't know that the third shift painting crew is currently short-staffed due to a massive flu outbreak.
Oh, wow.
Right, and it doesn't know that the specific blue paint required for this custom order has a drying time that fluctuates wildly based on the current humidity inside the factory.
Those are incredibly dynamic, real-world variables.
It's very dynamic. And the APS takes all of those constraints into its mathematical models and figures out the absolute most efficient, cost-effective way to get those 5,000 bikes built without creating a massive bottleneck on the floor.
It does the heavy strategic thinking.
Exactly. While the ERP just records the data, the APS dictates exactly what to do and when to do it.
That is fascinating. And, the sources point out that having this level of advanced planning allows a company to make very specific promises to their customers.
Yes, the promise.
And the material breaks these down into ATP, CTP, and PTP. Walk me through the mechanics of those, because they really seem to represent different evolutionary stages of a company's intelligence.
They absolutely represent a progression in maturity. So the most basic level is ATP, available to promise. This is fairly straightforward, honestly. An APS looks at the uncommitted portion of your finished goods inventory and your already planned production schedule.
So a major retailer calls and says, hey, we need 1,000 Blue Mountain bugs. ATP looks in the warehouse, sees 500 just sitting there, looks at the production line, sees another 500 coming off the line tomorrow that aren't claimed yet, and says, yes, we can promise delivery by Friday.
Correct. It completely relies on what is already finished or practically finished.
Yeah.
But what happens if the retailer calls and says, hey, we're doing a massive national promotion. I don't need 1,000 bikes. I need 20,000 bikes by the end of the month.
ATP fails there, right? Because you don't have 20,000 bikes sitting around, and they certainly aren't on the schedule for tomorrow.
Right, exactly. That is where you need CTP, capable to promise. CTP doesn't just look at finished goods. It reaches deep into your operational reality.
So it's digging into the supply side.
Deeply. It looks at your raw material inventory. It dynamically checks the lead times from your external suppliers. It evaluates your factory floor capacity and machine availability.
Right.
It essentially runs a massive simulation and says, if we reallocate resources and expedite some raw materials, are we physically capable of building 20,000 bikes in 4 weeks?
That requires incredible visibility. I mean, you aren't just looking at your own warehouse. You are querying your supplier's ability to send you more tires instantly.
Exactly. CTP tells you if it is physically possible. But, and this is a big book, just because something is physically possible doesn't mean it's actually a good idea.
Right, which brings us to the ultimate level, PTP, profitable to promise.
Yes.
Let me guess. PTP basically adds the accountant to the room.
It adds a highly sophisticated financial layer to the simulation, yes. Let's continue that scenario. CTP says, yes, we can physically build 20,000 bikes in 4 weeks.
Awesome, let's do it.
But wait, PTP runs the financial simulation and realizes that to pull this off, you actually have to pay your assembly workers double time for weekend shifts. You have to fly the aluminum frames in from overseas via incredibly expensive air freight instead of standard ocean freight.
Oh, the costs are adding up.
And to clear the manufacturing schedule to make room, you have to delay a smaller order for a different, highly loyal customer, potentially risking a massive contractual penalty.
So PTP calculates all of those hidden cascading costs.
Yes. And PTP might look at that massive 20,000 bike order and say, hey, if we accept this, the cost of expediting and overtime will completely consume the profit margin.
So you'd essentially be working for free.
Worse, it might say we will physically fulfill the order, but we will actually lose $100,000 doing it. PTP aligns operational capability with financial strategy. It stops a sales team from taking an order that looks amazing on the revenue sheet, but completely destroys the company's profitability.
That is a massive competitive advantage. You are essentially simulating the financial future before you even sign the contract.
Exactly.
But, let's step back into the real world for a second. An APS can plan the most brilliant, profitable, mathematically perfect schedule ever conceived, but the real world is chaotic.
Oh, incredibly chaotic.
Right, a truck blows a tire, a factory loses power, a port goes on strike. All those perfect plans just go right out the window instantly.
Which is exactly why planning is only half the battle. You have to actively manage the chaos. And that is the domain of SEM, supply chain event management.
Supply chain event management. The sources describe this as providing active visibility. How does active visibility differ from, just having a really nice dashboard with a lot of charts on it?
Well, a dashboard with charts is just passive visibility. It completely relies on a human being to sit there, stare at the screen, interpret the data, realize something is wrong, and then manually decide what to do about it.
Which is fine if you have 5 shipments.
Right, but the problem is volume. If you are moving 50,000 shipments globally at any given moment, a human being cannot possibly monitor all of them. SEM provides active visibility through what we call exception reporting.
Exception reporting, so it's only telling me when something breaks the rules.
Exactly. SEM is a software layer that simulates, controls, and responds to unplanned events based on predefined, workflow-enabled business rules. You tell the system the plan. And as long as everything goes according to the plan, the truck arrives on time, the temperature in the refrigerated container stays below freezing, the system stays completely silent.
I love that. It doesn't bother the supply chain manager with good news.
Exactly. It prevents data fatigue.
Yeah.
You don't just drown in a sea of green check marks all day.
Right.
But the millisecond an event deviates from the plan, which is the exception, the SCM system springs into action. Let's say a critical shipment of microchips is on a cargo vessel crossing the Pacific, destined for a port in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Suddenly, the ASCM system, which is actively scraping global news feeds and logistics databases in the background, detects that a massive labor strike has suddenly paralyzed the port of Los Angeles.
That is a catastrophic exception.
Massive. Now, in a passive system, that ship arrives in Los Angeles, drops anchor, and just sits in the harbor for 3 weeks while your manufacturing line shuts down because it has no microchips.
Because nobody noticed in time.
Right. But with SCM, the system flags the exception while the ship is still thousands of miles out at sea. It actively alerts the logistics manager, and crucially, it can actually simulate alternative solutions right then and there.
Really? Like, it gives you options.
Yes. It might suggest, hey, Port of LA is closed. Rerouting to the Port of Seattle will add 2 days of transit time and cost an extra $10,000 in rail freight, but it will prevent a line shutdown that would cost $5 million.
That is unbelievable. So the manager just clicks approve, and the crisis is averted before the ship even sees the California coast. It's giving you the gift of time.
It gives you the operational agility to react faster than the physical speed of the problem itself. And, SCM isn't just for global shipping. The sources provide a really brilliant example of how this active workflow logic applies inside a hospital setting.
Right. I actually wanted to ask about that because we usually just think of supply chains as boxes moving in warehouses.
A lot of people do. But the principles apply anywhere. Resources need to flow efficiently. In a hospital utilizing CM logic, a surgeon doesn't just verbally tell a nurse to schedule a procedure anymore. The surgeon enters an electronic order.
Okay.
And that single digital action is an event that triggers a massive automated cascade of resource allocation.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly like a domino effect. The system automatically reserves an operating room. It checks the complex schedules and assigns the necessary nursing staff and the anesthesiologist. It sends an alert to the hospital pharmacy to pull the specific surgical kits required for that exact procedure.
Wow. All from one click.
It even interfaces with the catering department to ensure the patient's post-operative dietary requirements are scheduled. All of that happens instantly, automatically, triggered by a single exception to the baseline state, which was the surgeon's order.
It totally eliminates the need for 6 different people to make 6 different phone calls. Okay, so we've covered the ERP brain, the APICS mathematical planner, and the SCM fire alarm. Now we need to talk about the physical reality. How do the boxes actually get moved? We need to look at the execution systems, specifically WMS and TMS.
Right, warehouse management systems and transportation management systems. These are the muscles of the operation. They take all those theoretical plans and actually execute them in the physical world.
So let's start inside the 4 walls of the facility with WMS.
Sure. A modern WMS does not just track inventory on a shelf. It orchestrates human and mechanical labor. It manages receiving, put away, inventory management, and directed picking.
Let's focus on directed picking for a second. In an old-school warehouse, I just assume a worker gets a paper list of orders and walks down the aisles looking for the items, right?
Which is incredibly painfully inefficient.
Yeah.
A human might walk down aisle 4 to get an item, they go all the way to aisle 10 for the next one, and then realize the third item is actually back in aisle 4.
So they're just walking in circles.
They were wasting miles of walking every single shift. A WMS uses algorithmic logic to perform directed picking. It aggregates dozens of different orders and calculates the absolute most efficient physical path through that warehouse.
Oh, that's smart.
It tells the worker via a handheld scanner or even voice commands through a headset exactly where to walk, what to grab, and in what sequence, virtually eliminating all that wasted movement.
And it also impacts how things are packed, right? Because there was a detail in the sources about WMS logic actually saving money on outbound shipping costs just by understanding carrier rules.
You're talking about pallet discount logic. A highly intelligent WMS doesn't just understand the warehouse racks, it understands the incredibly complex pricing tariffs of freight carriers.
Okay, break that down.
Well, in logistics, shipping LTL less than truckload is very expensive. If you only put a few boxes on a pallet, you pay a huge premium. But carriers offer bulk discounts if a pallet reaches a certain threshold.
Like hitting a bulk weight limit?
Exactly. Or an item count limit. The WMS might know that your primary carrier offers a massive discount if a pallet bound for a specific geographic region hits exactly 80 items.
Okay, so what does it do with that info?
The WMS will actively hold back smaller individual orders destined for that region, just aggregating them in a staging area. Once it mathematically calculates that it has exactly 80 items, it directs a worker to build that specific pallet, wrap it, and trigger the shipment, literally forcing the carrier to apply the discount.
The software is essentially playing a continuous game of Tetris with the orders to artificially construct cost savings. That is brilliant. Which I guess naturally leads us out the dock doors to the TMS, the Transportation Management System.
Yes. While WMS manages the inside, TMS orchestrates the massive network outside. It is responsible for route optimization, load planning, carrier selection, and freight auditing. And honestly, the financial impact of a TMS can be absolutely staggering.
The sources provide a phenomenal case study with Ace Hardware on this. Walk me through the Ace Hardware example. What was their main pain point before they implemented the TMS?
Before the TMS, if Ace Hardware needed to move massive amounts of freight across the country, their logistics managers were operating essentially in the dark ages.
How so?
They were relying on phone calls, faxes, and just historical relationships with a handful of trucking companies.
Okay.
They might manually call 5 carriers and ask for quotes. It was slow, it was manual, and it completely lacked competitive leverage.
Because if you only call 5 carriers, you have no idea if a 6th carrier 50 miles away has an empty truck. They're desperate to fill at a huge discount.
Exactly right. So Ace Hardware implemented a web-based TMS. And instead of a human making phone calls, the TMS aggregated their freight requirements and sent out an automated request for proposal, an RFP, to nearly 500 different carriers simultaneously over the internet.
It instantly created a massive hyper-competitive bidding war for their freight.
Precisely. Carriers could log into the portal, see the specific lanes Ace Hardware needed to run, and bid aggressively against each other. The TMS then analyzed the hundreds of bids, factored in carrier performance ratings, and automatically awarded the contracts to the optimal carriers.
Then what was the result?
By moving from manual phone calls to a digitized 500-carrier competitive environment, Ace Hardware saved $3.9 million,
Wow.
which amounted to roughly 4% of their total transportation costs.
I mean, 4% doesn't sound like much until you realize transportation is often the single biggest expense in a supply chain. Millions of dollars saved just by letting software do the negotiating for you.
It fundamentally changes the economics of moving freight.
Okay, so let's pause and look at what we've built here. We have a $20 million ERP acting as the brain. We have a highly sophisticated APICS running mathematical simulations. We have an ASCM system constantly scanning for global disruptions. And we have WMS and TMS executing physical movement flawlessly. But there is a massive glaring problem.
They don't naturally speak the same language.
Exactly. If the WMS was built by one software company and the ERP was built by a completely different company 10 years earlier, you essentially have a bunch of brilliant experts sitting in a room who just can't talk to each other. Having all this incredible software is totally useless if the data is trapped in isolated silos.
Which brings us to the crucial middle layer of this architecture, connectivity and the middle end. In information systems architecture, you have databases at the bottom and the software applications at the top. But the true magic happens in the middleware.
Think of it like the United Nations. You have hundreds of delegates from different countries. If you forced every single delegate to learn a completely new universal language before they could speak, it would take decades. It's basically impossible.
Right.
Instead, you leave everyone speaking their native language, and you just put a highly skilled translator in the middle.
That is the perfect way to understand it. Middleware is software that sits seamlessly between different applications, operating systems, or databases, and provides a translation and communication layer.
So it connects the old and the new.
Exactly. It allows incompatible systems, even completely archaic legacy systems held together by digital duct tape, to share data securely without requiring a massive multi-million-dollar rip and replace of the entire IT infrastructure.
It enables what the sources call straight-through processing. What does that mean in practical terms?
Straight-through processing means data is entered exactly once at the absolute point of origin, and it flows electronically through every subsequent system without ever requiring a human being to manually retype it.
Okay, so give me an example.
When a customer clicks buy on your website, that order flows to the middleware, translates into the ERP to record the revenue, translates into the WMS to trigger the picking process, and translates into the TMS to schedule the shipping label. Nobody touches a keyboard.
It's totally seamless. And historically, the way companies achieved this connectivity between different businesses was something called EDI, right?
EDI, Electronic Data Interchange. It is the granddaddy of supply chain connectivity. EDI established highly rigid, standardized formats for electronic documents like purchase orders and invoices. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was totally revolutionary because it finally replaced mailing physical paper and sending faxes.
But EDI has some pretty severe limitations for the modern high-speed world, doesn't it?
It really does. DDI is essentially a digital mail system. It typically relies on batch processing. You don't send one purchase order at a time. You aggregate 100 of them and send them in a batch at the end of the day.
Which means there's a huge delay.
Right. To use an analogy, EDI is like writing a very strictly formatted letter to a chef in a restaurant, putting it in a mailbox, and waiting until the next day for the chef to read it and mail you back a confirmation. It is not real time. And it is also notoriously expensive and complex to set up.
So what is replacing this digital mail system today?
The Internet Protocol, specifically the massive shift toward APIs and SOA.
Okay, let's break those down. APIs. Application Programming Interfaces. We hear that term literally everywhere. How does an API work compared to the EDI mail system?
If EDI is mailing a letter to the chef, an API is the waiter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you sit at the table with a menu. That is the front-end application. The kitchen is the database holding the food. You cannot go into the kitchen yourself. You need an intermediary.
The waiter.
The API is the waiter. You give the API your specific order. The API walks into the kitchen, translates your order into the chef's, waits for the food, and brings the data exactly back to your table in real time.
And because APIs use open internet standards, it's incredibly fast and flexible, right?
Extremely fast. It allows systems to communicate instantly over the web. And this leads directly to the broader architectural concept of SOA, service-oriented architecture.
Now, SOA sounds incredibly dense. How do we conceptualize service-oriented architecture?
Think of SOA like digital Lego blocks. In the old days of monolithic software, if you built an application, all the functions, the login screen, the credit card processing, the inventory check, they were all hard-coded into one massive block of code.
So they're all tangled up.
Right. If you wanted to change the credit card processor, you basically had to rewrite the whole application.
Which is terrifying and expensive.
Exactly. SOA breaks those functions down into independent, reusable services. You have a credit check Lego block. You have an inventory status Lego block. And these blocks communicate with each other via APIs.
So if a supplier wants to check my inventory, I don't give them access to my massive ERP database. I just give them access to the inventory status Lego block via an API.
Precisely. It is modular, it is lightweight, and it is highly scalable. You are exposing specific services rather than opening up your entire back-end architecture. And this level of real-time, API-driven connectivity is what finally unlocks true end-to-end visibility.
It allows you to look upstream deep into your suppliers' factories and look downstream deep into your retail channels. But, this is where we basically open Pandora's box.
We do. Visibility is a serious double-edged sword.
Because if I use APIs to deeply integrate my ERP with my supplier system so we have perfect visibility, I have basically just built a digital highway directly from the outside world right into the heart of my company.
You have vastly expanded your attack surface. When you connect systems, you are no longer just responsible for your own cybersecurity. You are entirely at the mercy of your weakest partner's cybersecurity. This is exactly why the technological roadmap must absolutely be accompanied by a rigorous legal and regulatory roadmap.
What are the specific risks we are talking about here? I mean, beyond just a hacker stealing passwords.
Well, the risks are literally existential. First, there's the massive risk of intellectual property loss. If you grant a supplier deep visibility into your demand forecasts, your upcoming promotional plans, and your CAD engineering drawings, you are trusting them completely. What stops that supplier, who might also manufacture goods for your direct competitor, from accidentally or intentionally leaking your strategic plans?
You essentially have to govern the behavior of a company you don't even own.
Yes, you must utilize incredibly strict non-disclosure agreements and highly granular role-based access controls in your software. The system must only allow the supplier's shipping clerk to see shipping data, not the financial margins of the product.
That makes sense.
Second, you face massive cybersecurity risks. If a ransomware gang breaches your mid-level packaging supplier, and that supplier is API integrated into your ERP, the ransomware can literally travel across that trusted connection and lock down your entire global enterprise.
Which is exactly why the sources emphasize adopting common security frameworks, like the NIST cybersecurity framework.
Yes, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. You cannot just ask the supplier, hey, are you secure? You have to contractually mandate that they audit their systems against the rigorous standardized controls of the NIST framework before you ever open an API connection.
It creates a baseline of digital hygiene across the entire supply chain network.
Precisely.
And then there is the legal nightmare of where the data physically lives. Data residency.
Oh, this is one of the most complex issues in global IT right now. We love to talk about the cloud as if data just, floats in the sky. But the cloud is just a physical server sitting in a heavily air-conditioned building in Virginia or Frankfurt or Singapore. Data has a physical geography.
And governments care very much about that geography.
Deeply. Many sovereign nations have enacted incredibly strict data residency laws. They mandate that any digital data generated by their citizens, especially personal identifiable information or financial data, must be physically stored on servers located strictly within their national borders. It cannot cross the border.
Wait, so if I am a global retailer headquartered in the US, but I am selling products to consumers in Europe via my e-commerce site, I can't just beam all that customer data back to my central ERP server in Texas.
If you do, you will face catastrophic regulatory fines under laws like the GDPR in Europe. You have to configure your global IT architecture so that the European consumer data stays on a localized server in Europe, while only anonymized aggregated sales figures flow back to the US master system.
Wow.
It requires immense architectural precision.
It is wild to think that in a borderless digital world, physical geography and national borders still completely dictate how software operates. But okay, assuming you navigate the legal minefield, assuming you lock down the cybersecurity, and assuming you connect your systems perfectly, you unlock a superpower.
You do.
You unlock the ability to entirely redefine how you sell.
You step out of the physical constraints of traditional retail and enter the wild realm of e-business and e-commerce.
Now, I really want to dive deep into this because there's a massive misconception about e-commerce. To the average person, e-commerce looks like a magic bullet, right?
Yeah.
You shut down your expensive physical stores, you fire the retail staff, you put up a website, and you just sit back and watch the pure profit roll in from a central warehouse.
Right.
But that is a total illusion, isn't it? E-commerce actually makes the physical supply chain drastically harder.
It makes it infinitely more complex and, in many areas, much, much more expensive. Let's look at the physics of traditional retail fulfillment versus e-commerce fulfillment.
Let's do it.
In a traditional brick-and-mortar model, a manufacturer produces a massive run of products. They load 50 pallets of shampoo onto a single full truckload and ship it to a regional wholesaler.
Very efficient.
Right. Then that wholesaler breaks it down and ships 5 pallets to a local big box retailer. Bulk movement of large standardized units.
Extremely efficient.
Exactly. Now, who does the final most expensive part of the work? The consumer does.
Right.
The consumer drives their own car to the store, walks down the aisle, acts as the warehouse picker by grabbing the single bottle of shampoo, acts as the packer by putting it in a bag, and provides the final mile transportation by driving it to their own house. The supply chain effectively offloaded the hardest logistics work onto the customer for free.
I have never thought about it like that. When I go to the store, I'm literally working as an unpaid warehouse picker and delivery driver for the retailer.
Precisely. You are doing the heavy lifting. Now look at e-commerce. When you shift to a B2C business to consumer e-commerce model, you completely reverse that dynamic.
Because the consumer isn't doing the work anymore.
Right. The seller is now forced to manage millions of tiny, highly customized individual orders. Instead of shipping one massive pallet of shampoo to a store, the warehouse now has to pick one single bottle of shampoo, put it in a highly protective cardboard box with bubble wrap, print a unique shipping label, and pay a parcel carrier like UPS or FedEx to drive it to a single residential address.
The outbound transportation costs must absolutely skyrocket.
They explode. You move from paying pennies per unit for full truckload freight to paying several dollars per unit for individual parcel delivery. Furthermore, the materials handling costs inside the warehouse shift dramatically.
Because you can't just move pallets anymore.
Exactly. You can't just use a forklift to move pallets. You need massive armies of human workers or incredibly expensive robotics walking miles to pick individual items from vast shelving arrays. And then you have to deal with reverse logistics.
Returns. The absolute nightmare of e-commerce.
Yes. In traditional retail, return rates are relatively low, and the customer brings the item physically back to the store. In e-commerce, particularly in apparel, return rates can easily exceed 30%.
30%.
Yeah, and the warehouse has to physically receive those individual boxes, open them, inspect the item, figure out if it can be resold, and carefully restock it. It is a highly labor-intensive, margin-crushing process.
So wait, if the outbound freight costs skyrocket, the labor costs jump, and the returns are a nightmare, why has e-commerce conquered the world?
Because it completely eliminates the constraints of distance and time. A physical store can only serve the people who live within a 20-mile radius, and it is only open 12 hours a day. An e-commerce platform serves the entire globe 24/7, 365 days a year.
The sheer volume overrides everything else.
Exactly. The sheer volume of addressable demand overrides the increased logistical friction. And strategically, it completely shifts the balance of power.
The sources talk about this shift in power regarding the channel master. Who dictates terms in the supply chain?
In a traditional model, the channel master was almost always the massive, big box retailer. Why? Because they physically controlled the shelf space. If you were a manufacturer and the big box retailer refused to put your product on their shelf, you effectively didn't exist to the consumer. The retailer held all the leverage.
But in an e-business world, shelf space is infinite.
Exactly. When physical assets become less important, the channel master shifts to the firm with the greatest brand equity, the smartest digital platform, and the most agile supply chain. You can bypass the traditional intermediaries entirely.
Let's look at the absolute titans of this shift mentioned in the sources: Amazon, Dell, and Alibaba. They all leveraged e-commerce, but they used radically different architectural strategies to dominate.
They're perfect case studies in digital evolution. Let's start with Amazon.
Okay.
Amazon began as a pure B2C model. They built a website, they bought books from publishers, held them in their own massive warehouses, and shipped them to consumers.
Classic retail model, just online.
Right. But their absolute genius wasn't just selling books. Their genius was recognizing that to sell books efficiently at scale, they had to build the most sophisticated IT and logistics infrastructure the world had ever seen.
They built the ultimate warehouse and software machine.
And once they built that machine, they realized something profound. The machine itself was actually more valuable than the products moving through it.
Oh, wow.
So they opened up their infrastructure. They evolved into a B2B2C model, business to business to consumer. They launched the Amazon Marketplace and Fulfillment by Amazon. They allowed third-party businesses to sell products on the Amazon website, and Amazon would handle the warehousing and shipping for a fee.
They completely transitioned from being a retailer to being the underlying utility for global commerce. What about Dell? Their strategy was completely different, right? They didn't build a massive marketplace. They totally revolutionized manufacturing.
Dell pioneered the direct assemble-to-order model. Before Dell, the computer industry operated on a build-to-stock model. Companies like IBM or Compaq would forecast what they thought consumers wanted, build millions of identical computers, ship them to retail stores, and just hope people bought them.
Which means they had hundreds of millions of dollars tied up in finished goods inventory.
Yes.
And if a new, faster microchip came out while those computers were sitting on the shelf, that inventory instantly became obsolete and had to be heavily discounted.
It was incredibly risky. Dell completely bypassed the retailer. They set up a B2C website where the customer could configure exactly what they wanted. More RAM, a bigger hard drive, a faster processor. Right. And the customer paid upfront via credit card. Only after the order and the cash were secured did Dell actually assemble the computer from raw components and ship it directly to the customer's house.
It's brilliant. They basically operated with negative working capital. They had the customer's money before they even had to pay their own suppliers for the parts.
Exactly. They replaced massive physical inventory with perfect digital information flows. They also utilized e-business for profound two-way communication. They launched initiatives like Direct to Dell, which was a corporate blog where executives engaged directly with customers.
So they were listening to the market in real time.
Yeah, if a laptop had a battery issue, Dell didn't have to wait for slow market research reports to come in. They heard about it instantly from their digital community and could alter their supply chain immediately.
And then we have Alibaba, dominating the Chinese market with an ecosystem that honestly makes Western platforms look almost simplistic.
Alibaba is an absolute masterclass in adapting to the specific constraints of a local market. When Alibaba started, China did not have a robust national logistics network. And more importantly, there's a massive lack of trust between buyers and sellers online. Credit card penetration was incredibly low.
I mean, if I don't trust the seller and I don't have a credit card, e-commerce is dead on arrival. How did they solve that?
They built a multi-layered ecosystem. First, they built Alibaba.com, a B2B platform connecting Chinese manufacturers with global wholesale buyers. But their true domestic dominance came from
Taobao.
Taobao is a massive B2C and C2C consumer-to-consumer marketplace. It functions like a massive digital bazaar.
But the business model of Taobao is fascinating because unlike eBay or early Amazon, they did not charge sellers any fees to list their merchandise.
They removed all barriers to entry. Anyone could open a store on Taobao for free. Millions of small merchants flooded the platform. Alibaba monetized Taobao not through listing fees, but through advertising and search rankings, very similar to how Google operates.
So if you wanted your store to appear at the top of the search results, you paid for placement.
Exactly.
Okay, so they got the merchants on board. But how did they solve the trust and payment issue for the buyers?
They built Alipay. Alipay was a revolutionary payment processing system based entirely on escrow. When a buyer purchased an item on Taobao, their money did not go to the seller.
Wait, really? Where did it go?
The money went to Alipay, which held it securely in an escrow account. The seller was notified that the funds were secured, so they shipped the item. Only after the buyer received the physical item, inspected it, and confirmed on the app that they were fully satisfied, did Alipay actually release the funds to the seller.
It completely eliminated the risk of fraud for both parties. It artificially manufactured trust through software.
It did. And eventually they built Tmall for established premium brands. They essentially orchestrated an entire digital economy from scratch. But, here is the major takeaway from all of these e-commerce titans. Because online fulfillment demands such extreme velocity, such tight margins, and such flawless execution, you can no longer afford to operate at arm's length from your suppliers.
You cannot guarantee two-day delivery to a consumer if you treat your raw material suppliers like adversaries. The adversarial transaction-based relationships of the 1980s are just completely dead.
Dead and gone.
Which naturally drives us into Section 4 of our exploration. Next-level teamwork and integration methods. We are moving beyond just connecting software via APIs. We are talking about fundamentally blurring the operational lines between separate corporate entities.
This is where we move from technological integration to deep strategic and operational integration.
I want you to run with an analogy here to help us understand the spectrum of this integration. Let's imagine a scenario involving a roommate and a refrigerator.
Okay, I like this.
Let's say we have an agreement that the fridge always needs to have milk in it. In a traditional, unintegrated supply chain, how does that work?
Well, in a traditional model, you and your roommate operate in silos. You open the fridge, notice the milk is gone, write milk on a piece of paper, drive to the grocery store, buy the milk, and put it in the fridge.
All manual.
You manage the inventory, you generated the purchase order, and you handle the logistics. The grocery store had absolutely no idea you were coming until you walked through the door.
Highly inefficient, prone to stockouts if I just forget to check the fridge. Now let's step up to the first level of integration. Quick response programs, or QRP. How does QRP change the roommate dynamic?
In a quick response program, you essentially grant the grocery store digital visibility. It is like putting a camera inside your refrigerator that connects directly to the grocery store's ERP system.
Wow.
The store can see exactly how much milk you drink every day. They're receiving your point of sale, or POS, data in real time.
So every time the cashier scans a barcode at a retail store, the manufacturer sees the ping.
Exactly. Now, in a basic QRP, you still have to physically place the order. You still have to say, hey, I need milk. But because the store has been watching your consumption rate, they have perfectly aligned their own supply chain.
So they're ready for me.
They made sure the exact brand of milk you want is waiting on the loading dock the very moment you ask for it. It reduces lead times and allows the supplier to schedule their production runs based on actual consumer demand rather than historical guesses.
And continuous replenishment, CR, takes it a half step further.
Yeah. In continuous replenishment, the supplier is receiving that daily POS data, and you agree that they will automatically replenish your stock at regular intervals without waiting for you to generate a formal purchase order.
They just send it.
They prepare the shipments based purely on the data flow. The goal is to continuously drive down the safety stock you have to hold in your back room, because the replenishment is highly predictable.
Okay, before we get to the really extreme integration, the sources mention something called distributor integration, or DI, and they use a great example involving beer. How does DI fit into this?
Distributor integration solves the lateral problem rather than an upstream problem. Often, a large manufacturer relies on a massive network of independent, franchise distributors to get their product to market.
Okay.
Historically, these distributors operated as isolated islands. If distributor A in Boston had a massive shortage of a seasonal beer and distributor B in New York accidentally ordered way too much of it, they had absolutely no way of knowing about each other's situations.
So distributor A loses sales, and distributor B is stuck with stale inventory.
A completely inefficient use of total system inventory.
Exactly. So how does DI fix that?
DI connects the information systems of all those independent distributors, creating a single, unified view of inventory across the entire network.
Yeah.
The manufacturer acts as the central orchestrator.
Like the Sam Adams example in the text.
Yes. Sam Adams uses DI. They can look at the network and see the imbalance. Sam Adams then acts as a broker, facilitating a transfer of the surplus beer from the New York distributor directly to the Boston distributor.
Oh, that's incredibly smart.
It smooths out local demand spikes, lowers the total inventory held across the entire system, and drastically improves customer service without Sam Adams having to brew a single extra drop of beer.
It's turning a fragmented network into a totally cooperative organism. Brilliant. Okay, let's go back to the roommate in the fridge. We've done QRP, where the store looks in the fridge. Now we reach the heavy hitter. Vendor-managed inventory, or VMI. What happens to the roommate here?
VMI is a massive paradigm shift in trust and control. In VMI, you give your roommate your credit card, and you give them the key to the house.
Wait, really?
Yes. The vendor assumes complete responsibility for monitoring the inventory, determining the replenishment quantities, and physically restocking the shelves. You, the buyer, completely abdicate the purchasing decision.
Wait, if I am a massive retail chain, why on earth would I give up control over what comes into my own stores? Doesn't the vendor have a massive incentive to just stuff my shelves full of excess products so they can hit their sales quotas?
That is the initial fear, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the contracts are structured with strict maximum and minimum inventory levels to prevent channel stuffing. The reason a retailer gives up control is that it totally eliminates their inventory management costs.
Right.
They don't have to pay buyers to sit in cubicles writing purchase orders all day. And they rarely experience stockouts because the vendor is laser-focused on their specific products.
And why does the supplier want all this extra work? I mean, they have to manage the buyer's warehouse now.
Because it completely neutralizes the single most destructive force in supply chain management, the bullwhip effect.
The bullwhip effect, break that down because it's a very critical concept.
The bullwhip effect occurs when tiny natural fluctuations in consumer demand at the retail level cause massive, panicked, wildly distorted swings in production upstream at the manufacturing level.
Give me an example of that.
Let's say a retailer normally sells 100 boxes of diapers a week. One week, they randomly sell 110. The retail manager panics, thinks it's a massive trend, and orders 150 boxes from the wholesaler just to be safe.
Okay, a little buffle.
The wholesaler sees a 50% jump in orders, panics, and orders 300 boxes from the manufacturer. The manufacturer sees a 300% jump, runs their factory on weekend overtime, and produces 500 boxes.
Wow. A tiny flick of the wrist at the consumer end creates a massive destructive wave at the manufacturing end.
Exactly. It results in massive overproduction, wasted overtime, and excess inventory just sitting in warehouses. VMI kills the bullwhip.
How?
Because the manufacturer like Procter & Gamble, in their famous VMI relationship with Walmart, is looking directly at the raw POS data and controlling the replenishment themselves. They aren't reacting to distorted, panicked purchase orders from a middleman.
They see the truth.
They see that only 110 boxes were actually sold. They optimize their manufacturing runs and their truckloads perfectly to replace exactly what was consumed. It saves millions in operational efficiency.
It replaces total guesswork with absolute reality. And VMI can also be combined with financial arrangements like consignment, right?
Yes. Consignment or vendor-owned inventory fundamentally shifts the financial risk. Frito-Lay is a classic example. When you see a Frito-Lay representative restocking the potato chip aisle in a grocery store, that is VMI. But it is also often consignment.
Meaning what?
The grocery store does not actually own those bags of chips sitting on their shelf. Frito-Lay owns them.
So the grocery store hasn't spent a dime on that inventory yet.
Exactly. The grocery store only pays Frito-Lay for the chips after a consumer actually takes a bag to the register and buys it. The financial transaction is triggered by the end consumption.
The hospital pacemaker example from the sources is an intense variation of this.
It is a high-stakes application of consignment without full VMI. A hospital must have highly expensive, life-saving pacemakers immediately available for emergency surgeries. They cannot afford to wait for a delivery.
Obviously.
However, the hospital's CFO absolutely does not want $5 million of capital tied up in pacemakers just sitting in a supply closet for 6 months.
It's terrible for cash flow.
Exactly. So they use a consignment model. The medical device supplier places the pacemakers physically inside the hospital, but the supplier retains ownership of the inventory.
Okay.
When a surgeon performs an operation and actually implants a specific pacemaker into a patient's chest, that physical event acts as the financial trigger. The hospital is then invoiced for that single unit, and the supplier ships a replacement to the closet.
It ensures immediate availability for the patient while entirely shifting the inventory carrying cost risk back to the manufacturer.
It's an incredibly elegant solution to a massive financial problem.
So we've gone from QRP to VMI. The supplier is in the house, restocking the fridge. But there is one final level of integration mentioned, the absolute pinnacle, CPFR, collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment.
If VMI is giving your roommate the credit card, CPFR is getting married, merging your bank accounts, and writing a joint 10-year life plan together. It is the ultimate expression of supply chain integration.
In VMI, the supplier is still basically just executing the physical restocking based on data. How is CPFR fundamentally different?
In a traditional model, or even in VMI, the retailer sits in a room and develops their own sales forecast. The manufacturer sits in a completely different room and develops their own production forecast. And these two forecasts almost never match, leading to friction.
Right.
In CPFR, the trading partners totally dismantle the walls. They sit at the exact same table, share highly sensitive strategic data, and collaboratively develop a single, shared forecast that drives both companies.
One version of the future.
Exactly. The CPFR process involves 4 distinct, highly integrated phases. First is strategy and planning. The retailer and the manufacturer sit down and define the ground rules. They share their corporate strategies. They plan joint promotions. For example, if the retailer is running a massive end cap promotion for back to school, the manufacturer integrates that directly into their long-term production schedule.
So no surprises at all.
None. The second phase is demand and supply management. They take the shared POS data, they take the promotional plans, and they basically fuse them together to create a single order forecast.
Okay, and then?
The third phase is execution, generating the orders, producing the goods, shipping the freight. And the final phase is analysis, where they jointly sit down, review the metrics, figure out what went wrong, and adjust the process for next time.
I mean, on paper, this sounds like an absolute utopia. Perfect harmony between buyer and seller, eliminating all waste. So why isn't every single company on Earth doing CPFR right now?
Because the technological barriers are easy compared to the human barriers. The catch is immense cultural resistance. CPFR requires a level of trust that goes against literally decades of corporate conditioning.
Because supply chain has traditionally been about squeezing the other guy for a better price.
Exactly. Buyers are taught to hide their true forecasts so they can negotiate better pricing. Sales teams are taught to push excess inventory onto retailers to hit quarterly bonuses. CPFR requires you to lay all your cards on the table.
Which is terrifying for them.
It is. You have to share sensitive promotional strategies and margin data with an external partner. Furthermore, it requires massive internal alignment. You cannot execute CPFR with a supplier if your own internal merchandising team and your own internal logistics team are actively fighting with each other.
You have to get your own house in perfect order before you can invite the neighbors to live with you. It requires visionary executive leadership to force a total culture change. But let's imagine you do it. Let's imagine you build the perfect utopia. You have your ERP brain, your APIs firing flawlessly, your WMS executing perfectly, and you are collaborating in a beautiful CPFR relationship with your suppliers.
The pinnacle of modern commerce.
Yes. But there is a fatal flaw hidden at the very bottom of this massive architecture. Because if the fundamental data being injected into this beautiful billion-dollar machine is flawed, the entire network will violently tear itself apart.
It is the oldest rule in computer science, amplified to a global scale. Garbage in, garbage out, at the speed of light.
Welcome to our final section, the source of truth master data management. Now, I will be the first to admit, when I hear the phrase data management, my eyes kind of glaze over.
Most people's do.
It sounds like digital janitor work. Dusting off servers and organizing spreadsheets. I need you to prove to me why managing master data is actually the most critical life or death strategic imperative a company has.
I can prove it by clearly distinguishing between transactional data and master data. Most people only think about transactional data.
Like what?
A customer clicks buy, a purchase order is created, a barcode is scanned, a shipping label is printed. Transactional data is highly volatile. It is created, it executes an action, and then it becomes historical record.
It's just the daily churn.
Yes, but master data is the DNA of the corporation. It is the core foundational description of business entities. Master data is your customer master file, your vendor master file, your standard financial costs, the physical dimensions of your products, and your engineering bills of material.
So it's static.
It changes very slowly. But here is the critical part. Every single piece of fast-moving transactional data must reference the static master data to execute properly.
Give me a worst-case scenario. What happens if the DNA is mutated?
Let's look at the item master file. Let's say a data entry clerk accidentally types that a new model of television weighs 450 pounds instead of 45 pounds.
Just one misplaced decimal point.
A tiny error that instantly creates a catastrophic system-wide failure. When a customer orders that TV, the ERP references the master data and thinks the order weighs 450 pounds. It sends that data to the WMS.
Okay, following.
The WMS logic determines that a standard forklift cannot lift it, so it directs a specialized heavy equipment team to the picking aisle, completely wasting hours of labor. Then, the WMS passes the data to the TMS. The TMS is trying to build a full truckload. It sees a 450-pound TV. It calculates that it can only fit 20 TVs on an 18-wheeler before hitting the legal highway weight limit.
Oh my God, so it dispatches a massive truck carrying almost nothing but empty air?
Exactly. You pay thousands of dollars to ship air, your warehouse labor is misallocated, and your customer is wildly confused when two guys show up with a crane to deliver a 45-pound television. A single error in master data multiplies exponentially, corrupting millions of subsequent transactions.
Okay, I'm thoroughly terrified. It is not janitorial work. It is maintaining the structural integrity of the bridge. The sources highlight something highly specific regarding engineering master data called effectivity dates. Why are these so critical?
Effectivity dates perfectly illustrate the intersection of master data and physical reality. An effectivity date is the exact, specific date upon which a new engineering document or a new bill of materials supersedes an older version.
Give me an example of how that works.
Let's say you manufacture a highly complex laptop. Your engineering team has developed a new, slightly faster microchip that will replace the older version, but you still have $3 million worth of the old microchip sitting in your warehouses globally. You absolutely do not want to just throw those old chips in the garbage.
No, that would be a massive financial write-off.
So engineering updates the master data with a precise effectivity date, let's say October 1st. The APICS and MRP systems look at that master data. They run their simulations. The software automatically calculates exactly how to pace production so that the remaining inventory of the old chips is perfectly consumed right up until the stroke of midnight on September 30th.
Wow.
Then, on October 1st, the master data seamlessly forces purchasing and manufacturing to switch to the new chip.
The software choreographs the phase-out perfectly to avoid waste. But if that effectivity date in the master data is entered wrong?
If the date is a month early, the factory line shuts down completely because purchasing hasn't secured the new chips yet. If the date is a month late, you were left with millions of dollars in obsolete, worthless old chips. The master data literally controls the physical reality of the factory floor.
Okay, you have completely convinced me that master data is the bedrock. But knowing how critical it is, it seems absolutely insane to rely on human beings typing on keyboards to maintain it. I mean, humans get tired, they hit the wrong key, they make typos. How do we build a system that guarantees accuracy?
The only way to guarantee accuracy is to remove the human from the data entry process as much as physically possible. This is the realm of automatic identification systems, or auto-ID. The goal is passive data capture at the source.
Passive capture, meaning the data enters the system without a human typing it.
Exactly. The most ubiquitous form of this, which totally revolutionized retail in the 70s and 80s, is the barcode. A 1D or 2D barcode physically encodes the product identifier. When a cashier scans a box of cereal, they aren't typing a 12-digit SKU number into the register, risking a typo.
Right.
The optical scanner reads the barcode and flawlessly inputs the data into the POS system. It drastically increases velocity and achieves near-perfect accuracy.
Barcodes change the world. But the text spends a lot of time on the next evolution of this. RFID, radio frequency identification. How does RFID leapfrog the barcode?
Well, a barcode is an optical technology. It requires line of sight. A human or a machine must physically point a laser directly at the printed label. This is slow if you are processing massive volumes of freight.
Because you have to see every single one.
Right. RFID completely breaks the line of sight constraint. An RFID tag consists of a tiny microchip and a microscopic antenna. Instead of a laser, an RFID reader uses radio waves to interrogate the tag.
So it doesn't need to actually see it.
Not at all. It can read a tag buried deep inside a sealed cardboard box sitting in the middle of a heavily wrapped pallet. And crucially, a single RFID reader can interrogate hundreds, even thousands, of tags simultaneously in a matter of seconds.
So imagine a forklift driver moving a massive pallet of mixed electronics. With barcodes, they would have to break down the entire pallet, scan each box individually, and rebuild it. With RFID, the forklift just drives through a dock door equipped with an RFID reader arch.
The moment the forklift drives through the arch, the system instantly, passively reads the 500 tags on the pallet. The ERP system is immediately updated. These 500 specific items have left the warehouse and are now loaded on truck number 42. Zero human intervention. Perfect data capture.
And the standard for this data, according to the sources, is the EPC.
Yes, the Electronic Product Code, managed by the global standards organization EPC Global. An EPC takes the logic of a standard barcode, which identifies the manufacturer and the class of product, like this is a 20-ounce bottle of brand X Cola.
Right.
But it adds an incredibly powerful new layer, a unique serial number.
So it doesn't just say this is a blue t-shirt, it says this is blue t-shirt number 4,982,117.
Correct. It allows for absolute item-level tracking across the entire global supply chain network. You can track the exact physical journey of a single bottle of pharmaceuticals, from the manufacturing vat in Switzerland to the specific pharmacy shelf in Chicago. It is the ultimate tool for anti-counterfeiting and chain of custody verification.
But the sources mention a feature of RFID that completely blew my mind, and it applies specifically to manufacturing, read-write capabilities.
Oh, this is where RFID transforms from a simple tracking device into a dynamic mobile database. A barcode is printed ink on paper, it is read only. Once printed, the data never changes. But certain RFID tags have read-write capabilities. The microchip has memory. You can dynamically alter the data stored on the tag from a distance using an RFID writer.
How does that actually work in a factory setting?
Imagine an engine block moving down an incredibly complex automotive assembly line. Starts as a raw block of metal. An RFID tag is attached to the sled carrying it. As it arrives at workstation A, the robotic arm queries the RFID tag. What do you need? The tag says, I need 6 specific pistons installed. The robot installs them. Then, the RFID writer at that station beams a signal to the tag, altering its memory. Update. Pistons installed at 10:04 a.m. by Robot 7. Proceed to the next step.
The product is literally carrying its own updated manufacturing instructions and history with it as it moves through the physical world.
The physical item and the digital master data merge perfectly. It allows for extreme mass customization. But here is the inevitable consequence of millions of RFID tags, constantly broadcasting their status every single second of the day.
What's that?
You generate a literal mountain of data.
An overwhelming tsunami of data.
Which brings us to the final component, data analysis and maintenance. Having billions of data points is totally useless if you cannot extract actual business intelligence from them. The first step is data aggregation. You pool multiple data points together to reduce variation. A retail executive doesn't need to know the movement of every individual blue t-shirt every second. They need the system to aggregate that data into a regional daily sales trend.
And then you feed that aggregated trend into a decision support system.
A DSS. These are systems built on advanced mathematical models and data mining techniques. They search for hidden, previously unknown correlations in the data. They help managers model complex trade-offs and perform what-if analyses. And increasingly, these DSS engines are powered by big data analytics.
Big data, the classic 3 Vs, volume, velocity, and variety.
Volume, the massive sheer size of the datasets, petabytes of information. Velocity, the speed at which the data is generated and processed, requiring a real-time analysis rather than end-of-month batch processing. And variety, which is honestly the most interesting part. Variety means combining highly structured master data from your ERP with highly unstructured data from the outside world.
Unstructured data, like what?
Like social media sentiment, global weather satellite imagery, or search engine trends. Companies use this massive fusion of data for demand sensing. Instead of looking at what sold last month, they use natural language processing to scan Twitter and TikTok to detect a sudden spike in interest for a specific type of apparel. They sense the demand forming in real time.
And then they execute demand shaping.
Exactly. If the big data engine senses that a viral video is causing a massive spike in demand for a product that you only have limited stock of, the DSS might automatically shape the demand by instantly raising the price on the e-commerce site.
Or what else?
Or actively pushing promotional discounts for a substitute product that you do have in stock, steering the consumer away from the impending stock out.
It's essentially manipulating the market in real time based on algorithmic insights. But to bring it all back to the bedrock, none of this magical big data AI analysis works if the underlying master data is corrupted.
Which raises a critical, very unglamorous necessity. Master data management requires rigorous, never-ending data cleansing and normalization.
You have to play the janitor.
You must actively scrub the databases. You run algorithms to find misspellings, to eliminate duplicated vendor files, and to fix structural anomalies. This is incredibly critical during corporate mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, I bet.
When Company A buys Company B, and they try to merge two massive, decades-old ERP systems, the data formatting clashes can literally paralyze the newly formed company for years if they don't rigorously normalize the master data first. You must institute strict data governance policies, defining exactly who has the authorization to change a master file.
Because if anyone can change the weight of the television, the whole system collapses.
Exactly. Without pristine, rigorously governed master data, your brilliant APS, your automated TMS, and your advanced big data predictive models are all just highly expensive engines running on contaminated fuel. The output will be completely disastrous.
It is the foundation of the empire. Okay, I think it is time to pull all of these massive concepts together for a final synthesis. We have covered an immense amount of ground today on this deep dive.
We really have mapped out the entire digital and physical nervous system of global commerce.
We started by looking at the evolution of the massive internal engines. We saw how MRP grew into the ERP, serving as the central brain and the single source of truth for the enterprise. We explored how companies bolt on best-of-breed systems, relying on the APICS to do the complex constraint mathematics to figure out if an order is actually profitable to promise.
We saw how ASCM acts as the active visibility fire alarm, using exception reporting to instantly alert a manager if a port strike threatens a shipment, allowing them to reroute before disaster strikes. And we looked at the muscle, the WMS orchestrating precise picking paths and pallet logic, and the TMS saving companies like Ace Hardware millions of dollars by automating competitive freight bidding.
Then we confronted the reality that these isolated systems must be connected. We explored the middleware acting as the UN translator, shifting away from clunky batch processing EDI toward lightning-fast, API-driven, service-oriented architectures. We saw how this straight-through processing opens Pandora's box, forcing companies to adopt strict NIST cybersecurity frameworks and navigate the geographical minefield of data residency laws.
From there, we looked at how those flawlessly connected systems completely redefine the physics of commerce. E-commerce isn't a magic bullet. It radically shifts transportation and labor costs back onto the supplier. We saw how it dethroned traditional big-box retailers, crowning new digitally agile channel masters like Amazon, Dell, and Alibaba, who leveraged platforms and perfect information flows to absolutely dominate their markets.
Which inevitably forces companies into next-level teamwork. We walked through the spectrum of integration, giving the roommate the credit card, moving from basic quick response programs sharing POS data to the massive trust exercise of vendor-managed inventory designed to kill the bullwhip effect, all the way to the ultimate collaborative utopia of CPFR, where buyers and suppliers dismantle their walls to operate on a single shared forecast.
And finally, we anchored all of that high-flying strategy in the uncompromising bedrock of master data. We saw how a single error in the DNA of a company multiplies exponentially. We explored the necessity of passive data capture through barcodes and read-write RFID tags, capturing clean data at the source to feed the big data analytics engines that sense and shape global demand.
It is a staggering, almost incomprehensible architectural achievement that millions of software systems executing billions of transactions all work together smoothly enough to deliver a $20 package to my doorstep in 2 days.
It is the invisible architecture of the modern world. It is the triumph of digital information orchestrating physical reality.
But, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, looking toward the near future.
Lay it on us.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about systems that connect, systems that analyze, and systems that optimize plans for humans to approve.
Right.
The APS suggests a plan, the manager clicks yes, the ASCM flags a port strike, the human reroutes the ship. But look at the trajectory of the technology we've discussed.
Okay.
If we have read-write RFID tags that autonomously update their own manufacturing status, If we have big data DSS engines that can automatically sense a spike in consumer demand on social media, and if we have cloud-based TMS platforms that can instantly send out automated RFPs to a network of carriers, how far away are we from a truly 100% autonomous supply chain?
Well, could we reach a point very soon where massive global supply chains negotiate complex contracts with each other, dynamically reconfigure their own physical warehouse networks, and launch entirely new manufacturing runs with absolutely zero human intervention? Could a supply chain react, reroute raw materials across the ocean, and deliver a finished product based entirely on machine learning algorithms responding to a sudden cultural trend, all before a human logistics manager even wakes up and pours their morning coffee?
That is profound. A completely self-driving global economy, the machine essentially running itself.
The software pieces are already built in place. It's no longer a question of if, it's just a matter of when the algorithm finally takes the wheel.
I absolutely love that. A brilliant, slightly terrifying, provocative thought to end on. Thank you to our expert for expertly guiding us through this incredibly complex landscape today. And thank you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive into the digital nervous system of global trade. The invisible world is always the most fascinating. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep learning. We will see you next time.